Good morning. It's a Tuesday morning in middle March, um, second week of Lent. And I think I mentioned that for Lent this year, I've taken up the study or the reading through some of C.S. Lewis. So I've read, you know, like many of you, I read Narnia, but I've never read any of his. And I always associated C.S. Lewis as kind of one of the cool guys that hung out with Tolkien. So he's been kind of in the pantheon, so to speak. But I've never like sat down and read his Christian writings. So I got a set that's not complete, but has I think eight or nine different volumes, and starting with Mere Christianity, which again, I didn't know anything about these. I knew he had written them. Mere Christianity is a collection of essays based on radio broadcasts that he made during the war. And they're presented as someone who has converted to Christianity. So he's not suggesting that he is a theologian of any great note, but he is a philosopher and a writer who has kind of gone along the path of dismissing all of the ideas of Christianity and ultimately recognizing their truth. And I may be on a similar path. I'm certainly very interested in how the sensations of worship that I experience at the Methodist church I go to, how that fits in with meditation, the prayerful aspects of my Buddhist practice. So I'm not looking to conflate the two because I recognize that salvation and enlightenment are two different projects. But they are both positive projects, and there's some overlap. So anyway, some reading C.S. Lewis was part of this effort to just educate myself a little bit more about the practices of Christianity. And so I just finished Mere Christianity, and one of the it covers a lot of it's a really interesting book, but one of the ideas in that book that really resonated with me and that I've been thinking about and want to try and understand more is when Lewis talks about the threefold nature of God, so Father, Son, Holy Spirit. And he ends up positioning it as, or describing it as, not three different aspects of the same thing, but the same thing three times, and in a way that, so what he did, I don't know if it was deliberate or not, but he referenced Flatland. He didn't call out Flatland, but he talked about the way to think about the threefold nature of the divine is to think about the relationship between a point and a line and a square and a square and a cube. A line, single line between 2 points. I cannot really imagine what it is to be a square, to have the concept of height and width. And a square cannot really imagine the concept of having an additional third dimension. So in Flatland, in fact, I've written about Flatland in my book because I find it a really powerful analogy. So we are three-dimensional beings, but the divine, I'm going to paraphrase what I think Lewis is saying, which is the relationship between the cube and the square is the same as the relationship between the divine and the cube. In Flatland, when the square asks that question, so the square is confronted by a sphere, and at first all the square can see is a thin line as the sphere moves through Flatland. But then the sphere uh, takes the square up and explains that there's additional dimensions. So now the square can see that what the Flatlanders think of as prison is really just a piece of paper, and you can actually move across the paper and appear to dissolve and reappear. Now, in Flatland, the sphere is a bit of an asshole. And in fact, when the square says, well, we have this series of relationships, it surely doesn't end with a sphere. What has that relationship to you, to the sphere, that you have to me, to the square? And instead of sort of celebrating this epiphany, true epiphany, instead of celebrating this transcendental moment, the square is imprisoned for being a madman. So, when Lewis talks about the Creator, Christ as kind of our companion, and then the Spirit, the Holy Spirit being within us, I don't think I should be reading that as meaning that there really are three different experiences. There's one experience that I experience in piecemeal because I'm moving through that higher dimension without the full toolkit to recognize it. Right? You get what that means? Like if I'm a square on a piece of paper and a sphere moves through, it's going to look like a point and then gradually widen out because I can only see this tiny little bit. And in that book, what I propose is that we, the human body, aren't changing over time. We're rotating. And we just don't have the perceptual mechanism to see the complete. But this is why I think music, and particularly music like Messiaen, helps us with this, because music, we can observe the entirety of a piece of music, right? So music unfolds in time. You hear it in time. But we can think about the entirety of the piece. We can behold the entirety of the piece. And so that, I think, that approach where we can contemplate a piece of music in its entirety without having to hear it is the same state of mind multiplied that we can use to cultivate and think about our own self. And then when we meditate and practice meditation and the idea of non-attachment to that immediate, what we're trying to do is let go of that sense that this here right now is the thing, and that the entirety is available for my comprehension. And what that feels like and what that experience looks like for individuals perhaps may be where all the multiplicity of divergent religious experience comes from. But I'm actually not so interested in that question. I think it's an interesting question, but I'm not trying to, at any point in my divergent studies, try to bring them together. Because I don't think you can. I don't think I can. You might be able to. So I think it's a question, the answer to which is not necessary for the enlightened mind. That question of, is Jesus describing in different language the same experience that the Buddha is? Maybe, but I'm not compelled to try to combine them. What I do think is that the process of analogy that's laid out in Flatland. The more I'm talking, the more I'm convincing myself that Flatland is one of the sacred texts in my own pantheon. So, but at the end of it, it's what is our experience? What is our experience of reality? And the language that I use in describing that to myself either propels me towards a sort of freer, open, happier experience, right? We'll talk about happiness. I have talked about happiness. Happiness is not the satiation of immediate desires. Right? Happiness has an eternal element to it. Music, meditation, study. This is Dharma for me. So anyway, you should expect more C.S. Lewis in the next few weeks as Lent progresses. Now that I'm making a start on it, but if you have any clarification that you'd like to share with me, like I said, I'm really just beginning this study, so I have sort of the only the most naive understanding of what he's writing about. But I'd love to engage in some questions and some discussion. So with that, I'm going to wrap this up and put it out there. And as always, keep your wits about you.